Welcome to another episode of Life in Focus, where we dive into the world of real estate through real life experiences and insights from our guest. I'm your host, Ben Tate, and today I'm joined again by my good friend, Nate. How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, dude?
Dude, fantastic. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Weekend time. Weekend before Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. A little spooky.
Yeah.
But Nate's joining us again. For those of you who might have missed the first episode, he was actually the first ever episode, I believe, on this podcast. And we talked a little bit about just kind of the day-to-day of being a small business owner, you know, how you made that transition from working for someone else and now working for yourself. Even though as a business owner, you kind of still work for other people, right?
Yep.
So, you know, in this episode, we're probably going to do a two-part series where we basically dive into more of the real estate side of things, kind of in your business, so to speak. So, but before we get into that, for those of you who may not know Nate, want to give us a quick, intro on yourself and then kind of what you've been up to since this time last year.
So again, my name is Nate, and I own a barbershop in the St. Pete, Clearwater area. I last year when him and I were talking about it, I was still fairly new, and I'd say I'm still pretty new at being a business owner, but last year we were just starting out with getting more employees in the business. Now we have a full team. The shop is rocking and rolling with that, and there's a lot of things going on. I think I was training for a bodybuilding show at the time. I ended up having to kind of let that pass for the time being with kind of dealing with getting foster kids and everything. Kind of took a little bit more time than we were thinking to kind of add that in. So, but yeah, just since the year has passed, like I said, been fostering with my wife. Currently in the process of adopting a child as well, which gives me 2 boys in the house.
There you go.
Man,
3 more, you have a basketball team.
I mean, good Lord. Having a 13-year-old and a 9.5-year-old, it can be kind of crazy in the house sometimes. But so yeah, that's kind of like the rundown of me in the past year. It's been going by super fast. It's just been business, fostering, and that's about all my life is these days. It
goes by quick when every day you wake up, you have a bill to pay or a card to swipe or someone to pick up or drop off or, just the normal day-to-day stuff. But I'm happy that you've had a full year since this time last time. And like I said, I wanted to kind of dive into more of the real estate stuff that's involved in your business. So, last time we talked about, you making that transition again to finding space for your barbershop, which again, for a barbershop, location's everything. Location's normally a priority when it comes to real estate as it is. But as a retail business, people have to be able to find you. It has to be convenient to their day-to-day. So, I know last time, again, we talked a little bit about how you chose a location. But let's break down kind of like, I guess, the budget-wise of, what was your budget going in from a rent perspective? And again, for those of you who may not know, when you're looking at commercial lease space, it typically is either on a triple net basis, meaning, you're paying the landlord rent for the space, but you're going to handle all the other ancillary expenses that may be taxes, CAM, insurance, utilities, etc. That's going to be a triple net lease term, right? Then there's what they call modified gross, which means, you might pay a portion of taxes, a portion of insurance. Basically, you're going to basically come to an agreement with the landlord on which expenses you'll pay outside of rent and which expenses he'll pay. Then they have what they call as full service, which is basically an all-inclusive, so to speak, where the price you pay the landlord considers all those ancillary expenses that we just talked about, whether it's insurance, CAM, taxes, etc. So in your case, what space did you end up going with? What kind of rent structure was it? And how did that kind of fit into your budget starting out?
Yeah, so when I was looking for a spot, I was going to be splitting it with someone because me and a buddy of mine decided to do a apparel store as well as a barbershop. So I knew that I wanted to be, for myself, at least somewhere lower than $1,500 a month for my side. The reason being for that was I didn't have any barbers at the time, so I knew that I was going to have to front the money until further notice, on top of all my other bills. So that's what kind of put me in that structure of, okay, well, what can I afford with how much I'm already making based off of my clientele and everything? What can I afford? And you and I kind of went over when I was looking at this building in particularly, we were looking at the structure of like the outlines that the real estate agent and everything was giving for it. And it's a triple net, which it kind of seems like that's more the going way these days.
Well, it's more advantageous for the landlord.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they basically, you as a triple net, it's more advantageous for them because it's almost like a seller financing deal at that point, right? Because you're basically acting as an owner without having ownership and equity.
Yeah. It's perfect for them.
Yeah.
It can suck for the people that are taking the lease.
But to be fair, that's exactly when you go rent an apartment or a condo, that's basically the structure that you're doing.
Right.
Without the taxes part.
And I think that in the end, you can still get a good deal off of those, especially if my big thing was that this owner of the complex, it's in a little bit more of an industrial area of the city. However, he had just put over $1 million into fixing up this complex. So I knew that there was going to be some advantages to that. When it came down to even the AC, that's a huge expense if something goes wrong with it. So when he had told me that they had just put in all new air duct, AC units, everything, that was a huge win for me because I knew that more than likely I wasn't going to have that as a worry for an expense later down the road. When I was structuring the deal, I wasn't really sure how long we were going to be. Of course, I want to be at a location for a long time, but you never know what's going to happen. You don't know how the entire U.S. economy is going to go. So you don't want to put yourself into a bind of a 10-year, lease. And
especially if business isn't good, you need to pivot. I mean, that's a big part of being a business owner is pivoting and obviously adjusting on the fly. What I'm saying?
So we did a 3-year lease with, I believe it's like a 3 to 5% increase every year to the rent, and it stayed. Actually, it's done really well because the taxes and everything have actually lowered. So, it's kept us pretty much about the same as what we had from the original. But it also gives the ability to figure out if that location is worth keeping. So, and that was another reason why I didn't want to go further than the 3 years, because it gave me that ability to see, okay, does this place make sense? Should we add on another place or just get rid of this place? So I took a lot of those things into consideration when thinking about this. I also knew that it was going to be a little bit more difficult just because it's on a main road that doesn't really have the ability for people to just, la-di-da-da, we're walking around town and, oh, here's a barbershop. So I knew that there was going to be some issues with that I knew I was going to have to try and figure out what I could do to keep the barbershop, going and people knowing about it. And, which Google is everything these days. Reviews are everything these days. So I structured it to where I knew that if I was going to pay a lower amount for this, then I would be able to at least be able to pay for the Google ads to make up for, not having the walk-by traffic.
So just to break it down for people listening, right? So you went into it with a budget of ideally $1,500 a month, at least your side of the payment, because you were splitting with somebody else, right?
Right.
So just to give a little bit more context, how many barber chairs do you have in that barbershop?
As of now, I have 6 barber chairs.
You have 6 barber chairs in the shop. And how does a barbershop owner generate revenue?
So there's a couple different ways that a barbershop owner can generate revenue. A lot of times people think that it's the booth rental. So if you were a barber, you're just paying me a flat fee of that week. A lot of people do that, and it's a good way to know you're going to get money. However, you need barbers that have a book. If they don't have a book, then they're like, oh yeah, it's $300 a week. That's fine. I can do that. Well, they can do it for 2 weeks and then realize they don't have as much clientele as they were hoping for. Or clientele didn't stay with them from their other shop. So the other way to go about that is doing commission And no matter how you structure the commission rate, whether it's a 60-40 split, a 50-50, whatever, in the end, I feel like that's the best way as a business owner to generate the most revenue. However, on the other side of that, you might have to take some time before you actually see anything coming through, and that's kind of on you as well as the business owner, because you have to have those Google ads running. Because if these barbers, they might just be a brand new barber. They don't have any clientele other than a couple of their friends.
Right.
And so you have to basically generate the business for them. So that way, after a while, those people continue coming back. You're getting more money off of that versus just that flat fee. However, I do think that kind of having a mix between the two in the shop is a great way to have that peace of mind that you're always getting paid, and then have the ability to get even more. Or for the low weeks, like for the hurricanes, we didn't have many people coming through during those weeks preparing for it. That's just how it goes. And so my barbers ended up not making that much. I didn't make that much, but I did have 2 people who are booth rental in the shop, and it's a lease agreement. So whether there's issues, with the weather or whatnot, doesn't matter. They got to pay it. And just like I would have to pay the rent, I can't just go to the landlord and be like, hey, sorry, man, like I can't pay it because, 2 weeks of the month we were screwed.
Yeah.
He might help, but he doesn't have to,
right,
kind of thing.
Would it ever make sense to do like a hybrid, in the sense of, you say, listen, like annually, I'm going to charge you basically an annual fee. For easy math, maybe it's $500 annually. The rest of the month, we still take the commission percentage, but at least there's like that flat annual.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would, move the needle, because obviously 500 times 6, only $3,000.
Right.
But that's maybe 2 months of your payments at that 1,500 threshold.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So like, if I understand correctly, you're saying like have like somewhat, if let's say it's a commissioned barber, they end up, for half of the month, they are actually booth rental, and then they get maybe a higher percentage of their commission for the last 2 weeks,
right,
because they almost already paid a little bit up front. Is that what I'm kind of understanding?
Well, I was thinking more of like, so if you get your medical marijuana card, for instance, right? They treat it almost like car registration annually, where you have to pay that $70 a year for the 1 year, or the whatever it is for the 2 year. You know what I'm saying? So for the medical marijuana card, you have to pay an annual fee, and then each month you can pay like a monthly fee instead of paying a much larger fee for your doctor's appointments every 6 months.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, basically, they're paying an annual fee to lock them in to have that chair, so to speak, for the year. But then obviously, something that basically scratches your back for all the stuff you're doing on the marketing side of things. Yeah, I
mean, and that's a big thing too, is because when these people end up coming, especially for, a booth rental, I supply the ability for marketing to come through. Usually it's like, hey, this is your chair. You have to pay for your own product. You have to do your own marketing, whatever. I don't own anything that you do. However, how I have it is I make it easier for them. I make it almost like they were a commissioned barber. It just ends up being that they have the ability to set their own prices, and they have the ability to come and go as they please.
Do you think it makes it harder? I think it makes it harder or easier, the fact that you're obviously a full-time barber prior to owning the business, so you kind of see the barber side of things and the ownership side of things, which sometimes can be aligned but not the same. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, because I know a couple different shops that they're owned by people that aren't barbers. And it's not that those can't work, because obviously as entrepreneurs, we can own something and not know a damn thing about it.
Sure.
But it's how you go about, being the owner of that. I personally have the ability to know how a barber feels, how they react to certain things, all that things. And then I know from the business side on how to structure different things that might work better for them, might work better for me, and then just kind of collaborate. Because in the end, I don't want them to be screwed over. I don't want me to be screwed over. It comes down to you're spending the most time with them versus your family.
Sure.
So it's not good to screw over anyone.
Sure, you want it to be incentive-based.
You want everyone to be able to leave completely full for that day and satisfied. So I think it's nice to be able to have both the business side, the business owner side of things, and being the barber. It gives me the ability to kind of see and understand each person individually on what their needs might be.
Okay, so let's get back into some of the real estate numbers. So what was your actual lease term for the current space?
So 3 years was the lease term.
So what was the rate? I meant to say, I'm sorry.
Oh, so the rate, I think it was $12 per square foot. And then we had like obviously taxes and CAM fee and everything. I think in total, and it's real cheap. I set myself.
Do you know
at
what
like,
the taxes and CAM was separately, or is it kind of all?
They do break it down. I probably should look at that more, but I don't. I just kind of say pay now and call it a day. They usually will every year. Will kind of go over the new structure with it, but I believe in total right now we're paying $1,569, and that's split between me and another guy. I pay for most of it just because I own more of the space. But yeah, like when it came to that was the structure of that $1,569. Worst case scenario, if he moves out, I still have that ability to be able to pay it.
Sure.
And that was the big thing because
mitigate some risk there.
Yeah, because if things happen, life happens. So if he had to move out, I need to make sure that I can afford it just off of me. Because again, when it comes to a barbershop, what people don't realize is the revenue is the barbers. That person, I mean, you went from my old shop to my new shop, even though like you would call in asking for me and, oh, he's not here anymore. Well, you didn't be like, okay, cool, I'll just keep with you. Now, some people might, but it largely is based off of your relationship with the barber. So if they leave, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So that means that, and then me as a barber, it makes it better for me because I can step behind the chair again and make that money up. But like I have to be ready to do that worst case scenario.
So this kind of off the real estate topic, but just kind of curious here. As you continue your success and grow your brand and grow your shop success, will you be looking to backfill occupied booths with better barbers and stylists? Or will you have a loyalty to the people that started with you prior to this next rung of success?
I have a pretty big loyalty to the guys that I have because guys and girl that I have currently, just because they took a risk on a shop, especially my first barber. He took a risk when it was just me in the building. It was empty.
Yeah.
And he walks in and he's just kind of looking around and, then he had gone to other barbershops that were already running and everything. And he had heard about my shop and everything. So he came in and he's now been with me for 2 years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And he, him and I are really close, and he's like, I want to be out of the business within 5 years. So you have me for another 5 years at least. And to me, that speaks volume that I'm able to have that kind of relationship with each individual barber. They tell me like what their plan is in life, if they plan on moving, things like that. And I like that because then it means that. And then there's that relationship to where I don't want to screw them over and just, I'm going to get new people in and, you're going to have to share a station and everything. I'm sure they would be okay with it, but I want to be able to give them the ability to feel like, they have almost ownership over their station in that area and be, proud of being at that spot versus like, oh, I'm just another barber that is just used for money.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said you've been there for about 2 years or maybe a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
The lease renewal, that means the lease renewal is coming up if you sign a 3-year term.
Yep.
Those 3 to 5% escalations to your rent, that's pretty standard. Obviously, that's for the landlord to cover on inflation, so to speak.
Right.
And some commercial leases, they'll say the greater of CPI or 3%,
right,
or 4%, whatever the percentage is, or the greater of the two, right? Because sometimes the inflation can be much higher than 3%. 3%'s kind of a standard threshold that's been used for decades as just kind of like a real estate basic lawyer contract thing. So sometimes as a tenant, you can actually actually that ends up being a pretty good deal, right? If it doesn't keep pace with inflation. But more importantly, lease renewals in general can be tricky. Obviously, it depends on how good of a relationship you have with the present landlord,
right?
How well the business is doing, right? And obviously, the landlord I think still has some culpability in this as well, because again, if he doesn't maintain the plaza, if he doesn't do certain things from the signage or whatever the case is to make it easier or make you guys as owners that are renting from him want to renew, right? So walk us through kind of your initial thoughts right now on, either staying in that current space and renewing or finding some new space. Yeah.
So funny you mentioned that. So our lease ends March 1st of this coming year, so 2025. And I've been dabbling in eventually getting a new shop, and we're planning on moving. Me and my wife and my family are planning on moving to Maine or the New Hampshire area after my oldest is out of high school. So we got about 6.5 more years. So I've been dabbling, trying to think like, okay, maybe I should open something up there and then just go back and forth. And when I started realizing that like it was a little too much work right now, because I am still behind the chair a little bit, it just didn't make sense. But how could I make the business that I have get bigger so that way I don't have to be behind the chair? Well, that means that I need to kind of restructure where we are. It's been a great location, but it's only going to get capped at that unless I put even more money into Google Ads, which sure you can do, but you don't want to have to rely on that.
Right.
And I want to be able to be known a little bit more. So, March 1st is our lease renewal. We aren't going to renew at this location for a couple reasons.
100% or as of now?
100%. We're not going to be staying there. Couple reasons is like one, like I said, I want to be able to grow it. But two, unfortunately, like the management isn't doing the best job at keeping the place, looking good. They also, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. A couple months ago, they added a new place in there, and they have 2 barbers. So we're getting a lot of people coming in being like, hey, I have an appointment with this guy. And we're like, no, he doesn't work here. So you must be talking about the person 2 doors down.
Oh, really? There's a barbershop 2 doors down?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it just kind of opened up. It was called like Missy's Boutique, and it was on the other side of the plaza.
Yeah.
And it was just doing, women's stuff. So there was no issue there. But they ended up moving back. They ended up like leaving for a little while and then moving to our location again, but just in a smaller spot, 2 doors down. And then they added barbers. To me, I feel like that's a conflict of interest.
It is. I mean, that's something that's obviously good for you to take in your next negotiation with your next space.
Right.
That, hey, if I sign here, I got to be the only barber in this strip.
Right.
I mean, you think that's like, you think that'd be common knowledge.
Yeah, you would.
A courteous, courtesy.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, when I heard that there was barbers over there, at first I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to affect our business because we already have a following. But the more I thought about it, I was like, it's the principle of the matter. Like that, there should never have had that.
It's definitely going to impact the business.
Yeah.
You don't see 2 Chinese restaurants in a Publix plaza.
Well, and then
2 Subways.
What kind of got me was when I'd have barbers coming to me and they're like, yeah, we were walking outside and with our clients, and then the other barbers that were from the other location were standing out there and they're saying, hey, you guys want a better haircut? And I'm like, that rubs me the wrong way, because one, you shouldn't even be saying that, and two, when they come right out of a barbershop, you make yourself look bad in reality. But and when I contacted management, they're like, well, we don't have anything to say that they can't be there, but I understand your frustration. I'm like, okay, so like, we've been loyal.
He's have to find another tenant.
Right,
so
exactly.
That's going to be an issue for him. So it's like,
and that's the thing. Like, we could have maybe thought about staying and just having that as like, a small location and still moved. But now I don't want to be in it at all because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So we've started looking at properties around the area, back towards more of the downtown area, because we're probably about 17 to 20 minutes from downtown. And also it was great because, the payment was much better. However, things are starting to turn. It's not as high for real estate cost as much as it was a year ago.
Sure.
You and I were looking at stuff for a coffee shop and a barbershop at one point just a year ago, and it was skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And so this year, prices have gone down, so it's made it a lot more, it's made it easier for me to then think, okay, well, let's maybe go up a little bit more in our rent price, but we have to still like maintain like where it's not astronomical and be logical about how much we're spending versus how much is coming into the business.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. So in part 2, we'll get into a little bit more of where you're looking for space, the new budget for this new space, the size of the new space, etc.
Yeah.
But before we end this episode, let's talk a little bit about you. So you mentioned you have your loyalty to your barbers, right?
Yeah.
And your stylist. Are you doing kind of a meeting of the minds from a location standpoint of where they'd like to be in the new location?
Yeah.
Or they just, if it's busy, they're happy, or would they like it close to where their kids go to school, where they live?
Yeah.
Is that all considerations that you're taking?
100%. So, I know where everyone lives in my barbershop. I know where they live, or the area. And I also know where some of the barbers that just came to the shop, I know where their old location was. And so I have to take that into consideration because their clientele might not want to be, 17 minutes from where they were going. It might not seem like a big deal, but if they're on a time crunch already, then that's a big deal. So because of that, I knew that I was going to have to accommodate to everyone, not just the barbers, but the clientele. And so I felt like a happy medium was, 10 minutes away from where we are now, but also a little bit closer to the downtown because everyone's kind of in that area for my barbers and the people that are, coming to us. We do have a couple people that are, in the Largo area, which is a little bit further to the west, but we know that we're going to lose some clientele. It's natural, but you have to go with what makes the most sense. And so I've talked to all the barbers and gotten their thoughts, and of course all of them are, yeah, it's super cool. I would love to be a lot closer because my drive will be cut down, and my clients, they already are saying that they don't like coming up here, and it's like, I understand that. Just let them know we are planning on moving and being more accommodating in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, you're coming to the tail end of, year 3 of renting your first lease space. As I know you had that intermediate space while you're waiting for the space to get done, but in theory, your first major lease here. So what are the top 3 things that you could pass on to somebody else that now after going through this 3 year, 3 years?
I'd say the top 3 things. 1, talk to people that are friends of yours that have some kind of knowledge on this, because I didn't know anything. And that's why I came to you and had you look over stuff, because I can try and understand it. And if I ended up just signing something, I could be screwing myself over.
Sure.
Even though it seems like, oh yeah, it makes sense, all good.
Yeah.
You might be screwing yourself over. So I'd say number 1, find someone that's somewhat in real estate or business that you can just kind of
bounce ideas
run
off.
some things off of. Yeah. Number 2, be patient. Be patient, because when you're trying to start a business and you're excited about it, you see one spot, you're like, yeah, let's go for it. That might not be the right space, but in your eyes, right then and there, you want it to be.
Yep.
So you give all the reasons on why it would be a good space, but you're not actually looking at the negatives of what it might be.
Right.
So patience is another one. For the third one, man, I don't know if I have like a third one in particularly. Depending on what the business is, it's gonna all be about like where, kind of with the location side, you have to know what the demographic is. What are you trying to accomplish in the end? If it's going to be, that you're a small business, are you planning on being there for a long time? Well, then look at the area around you. Make sure that it's actually going to be something that, like, if you're a barbershop, but then you have, a bank across the street, to some people, they might be like, oh, well, that's not going to make sense. It can make a lot of sense because now you have bankers who they don't have time to just be able to go to a barber down the road. They can go across the street. So looking at where you're doing it is really, it kind of takes up 2 and 3 of those things. Like you have to look at it from so many different standpoints.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. From a comedy perspective, I was just thinking, just popped in my head, but if you had a barbershop located in the same plaza as a DMV,
yeah,
you're just like walking in with your cape, you're like 21. Like they call your number.
True. Like you're going to be waiting long enough. You might as well just get a haircut while you're at it.
But no, those are good three things to, I mean, everything we do, we learn from. Yeah. 2.5, almost 3. But no, I think that's powerful. And, I think, the best knowledge is knowledge that you can learn from somebody else, and so, I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So we're going to get more to the nook and crannies of this next space, which will likely, like you said, if you have a 6-year plan, ideally this next space will take you, not to say you're going to sign a 6-year lease,
right?
But even if you sign a 2-3 year lease, you want to ideally, renew that lease. That way you don't have to keep moving. Moving's probably the worst thing to do in life, whether it's personal or for business. So that sounds good. Again, I appreciate you taking the time to come with us, and stay tuned for part 2.